You're listening to the Loving Your Own Soul podcast, and I'm your host, Britt. Guided by my own intuition, my intention is to deliver genuine conversations centered around health and wellness, spirituality, self-expression, and culture. In this space, I will provide you with real-life stories, theories, and inspiring perspectives to help you uncover and tap into your own true potential. I'm so grateful you've chosen to tune in with me on this mindful exploration to living a more fluid life through a deeper connection to the soul. Now let's dive into today's journey. Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Britt, and I'm truly so grateful for you for tuning in here today. Whether you've been a longtime listener, are new to the show, wherever you are joining us from, just know that I'm grateful to have your ears, your presence, your energy tuning in to the show here today, this special conversation. And yeah, just thank you. And also thank you for doing you. You know, I don't think enough of the time we really give ourselves credit for just doing the things that light us up, honoring our own curiosities, inner inklings, our inner knowings, our intuition, etc. This life it's a wild one, but it's a fun one at that. And I really just encourage you to just continue doing you and don't be afraid to do you. I know it can be scary at that. Listening to myself right now honestly feels a little weird. You may not be able to hear it in my voice. I am currently on the mend after coming down with the old coronavirus. And yeah, we made it through, but it is a beast. And it's really weird for me to talk when I know that my voice is not 100%. I'm not sure if anybody else struggles with this, but for me, it's this weird, it's almost like I have a really hard time getting into a true stream of consciousness where consciously I know that something about hearing my own voice isn't in my own rhythm and sound and just kind of regularity. So it's a little bit weird, but let me go ahead and get into our guest today. So today on the show, I'm bringing on Deb Acker, who is an intuitive relationship healer. And one of the things with Deb and her work that she is kind of transitioning and, pivoting into, I believe whenever we make these pivots, they've always been with us for forever, and they've always been just a part of us. We just sometimes need certain steps in our journey to get us to really notice them and reopen up to them. But she will be talking all about new paradigm love, or some of you know the new paradigm is also known as 5D. So new paradigm love, 5D love. Deb is the master of love and just such an incredible individual. Truly just a wealth of knowledge and wisdom, intuition. She is wonderful. So today we talk all about being yourself, which is why I kind of opened up with that little riff there a couple seconds ago, understanding different blockages or wounds that come up for us, ways that we can really start to move closer to being ourselves, and more so being ourselves in relationships, and really just the symbolism of deep self-love and what that means to embody it. So Deb is wonderful. I know that you all are going to love her just as much as I do. She's just so wonderful. I highly recommend connecting with her, checking out her programs, and yeah, hopefully you learn something new today, or maybe you find a sense of connection or an aha moment, whatever that is. In the least, take this time for you, be present, and yeah, just enjoy this conversation. So without further ado, let's jump into today's episode with Deb Acker. I hope you enjoy, and I will see you on the other side. Well, Deb, welcome to the Loving Your Own Soul podcast. It's truly just such a pleasure to have you on here. I'm so excited for our listeners to get to know you a little bit better if they're not already familiar. And I just know we're going to have such a fun conversation today.
Yeah, I'm so grateful to be here. I'm so excited to have this conversation. Genuinely, I'm all this stuff coming in and everything. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Well, how are you? And I genuinely mean that. How are you truly doing right now? How's your summer been? How's life?
Yeah, I am good. As I was sharing with you a little bit before this call, I'm in a huge transition. And so it's a very interesting time for me because I'm in this space of like open space where I don't have a set place that I'm living, sort of just traveling around and really feeling into where I'm supposed to be and where I'm meant to be, following my guidance, and also recognizing that space within me that so much of the time our home represents how we feel safe.
Mm.
And so to have that inner feeling of home versus the outer feeling and how I feel safe, no matter whether I have a place like that I've lined up to stay the next night or I don't, right? And so that's been a really interesting time and interesting experiment for me. But yes, I am. So I'm doing well, and there's a lot going on. And so my honest answer to that is yes, I'm so excited for what's coming and all of the energies that are coming in to prepare me for this. It's intense and it's a lot. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Love that. I would love to hear from you if you don't mind sharing just in these transition phases and things like that. What kind of tools or practices or a go-to do you use to really kind of feel grounded, find that sense of safety and connection for yourself?
Yeah. So the word that I heard when you were asking me that question was trust.
Mm.
Right. And so one of the mottos, and I've really held it very strongly during this time, is a no is a yes, I can't see. So the long and the short of this experience was like my apartment got sold I had to be out by the end of May. And at the time I was looking for an apartment or a different type of place, a guest house in Arizona. And at the time I did not have this fundamental no is yes, I can't see. Right. So this is all getting pulled away. Nothing's coming in that's feeling right. And all I know is that, I'm in total trust of my environment and that I'm protected and that I'm safe and I'm not going to be, homeless or whatever, so to speak. But it was a really interesting time. And then throughout this period, even in small things, like for instance, I'm out in the California area right now, and I asked my cousins about staying with them, and it didn't work out for a couple of different reasons. And I my automatic go-to right now is that's exactly the way it's meant to be. Like that's exactly, I don't know why, but I know that whether it's just because I'm meant to be in my own energy right now, or there's chaos in that environment that's not for me, whatever that is, I know that I'm meant to be exactly where I am. And that like I'm saying, I'm Airbnb a lot. So it's like, if that doesn't happen, I'm like, perfect, then I'm being protected, right? Or there's something better for me. And so to answer your question, that's a tool that I'm putting into place where it's just, okay, I wonder how this is even better. This will work out even better than I intended or that I hoped for, or, I wonder what's going to open as a result of this. And so just being in that state of wonder and then total trust that the universe, source, and my guides, as well as myself, has my own back, and really what that looks like.
Mm. Beautiful. I mean, what a way to open this entire conversation. And talking about trusting and being exactly where we are supposed to be. So today we're going to be talking all about relationships and how to be yourself in relationships. And honestly, the timing of this conversation is just so funny on my end because I am just really going through it and learning a lot, and I'm being asked to really step up as myself and truly be myself in a couple of different situations and things that are just happening in real time as we're recording. So it's just, last night I was like, oh my gosh, with everything going on to, have this conversation today. It's funny the way things work out, but I completely honor everything that you just said and just really leaning into that ability of full trust. So I love that.
Yeah, no, I think I'm sure anyone that's going to be tuning into this episode, there is so much going on, not only, within ourselves, but on the planet. And so, for anyone that's listening, if they're finding themselves struggling or they're finding themselves really in an intense place or something that's unique and new. For me, I have never found myself in a space where I wasn't like, this is where I'm moving to. And that's like really set. I mean, when I moved to Arizona last year, it was a little bit of that, but I found a place within like a week. So it wasn't like this, 2 months of total open space. And so just for anyone listening, understanding that that is actually part of the journey, and rewiring that unknown or rewiring that discomfort. For me, one of the things that makes it way more fun is I think of it as adventure versus thinking of it as, oh my God, here's something bad, horrible, whatever. Right. And so I really try to think of it in that way versus any other way.
I love that. So good. Aker totally has a quote surrounding that about life is an adventure, not a package tour. Something like that.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't, I've seen a little bit of this stuff, but yeah, no, it's awesome.
Yeah.
It's like the adventure of life. And that makes it so much more fun too. I mean, a lot of, I tend to attract people that are really into adventure too. So, that's just part of it. Right. And you can add to any of the other outer adventures of trips and all of that as well. So.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about you. You are an intuitive relationship healer.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess why don't we start by what exactly is that? What does kind of your line of work entail for you?
Yeah, so super interesting. So this is ever evolving. So I have added, and this, I'm going to say it like this, I've added the title of Master of Love with that intuitive relationship healer as I move more into teaching people how do we create next level love in our lives, right? How do we create, I'm calling it new paradigm love. You might also call it 5D love. As an intuitive relationship healer and master of love, a lot of what I teach people is, first and foremost, we've got to start with ourselves, right? How do we build that relationship with ourselves? And as part of that, in having our own back, it's so important that we do the healing work on our patterns, on the pains that we've experienced in our childhood and in any of our relationships, right? So, if we haven't healed our relationships with our parents, if we've experienced pain from a partner, whether past, present, I was gonna say or future, that's whether past or present, there's that piece of that. There's also the piece of really doing the forgiveness work, right? And that space of really, again, how can I let all these things go to have my own back at all times? So many of us are seeking safety in our relationships. The way that we feel safe in our relationships is that we have to first and foremost feel safe with ourselves. And so as we do that, one component of that is feeling our feelings, right? And not running away or trying to avoid or cover up or escape, or, you name it, all of the different ways that we just get trained. We haven't historically been in the practice of how do I be with myself, right? And last year, case in point, many people had that as a practice, and there was a lot of resistance that came up, understandably, as a result of that, right? And so the practice was, it's like, how can I get comfortable being in more open space? How can I get, comfortable many times being with myself? And how do, when what are perceived as negative emotions, when those come up, how do I actually stay with those to allow me to create more in my life and in my relationships? And so healing relationships, huge part of the work that I do. And then when I say master of love, right, basically this new paradigm love that I am starting to share in the world, there's so many pieces to how we actually create a relationship that continues to grow throughout its lifetime. There's so many pieces to how do we create a relationship that feels so exciting, so alive, so juicy, and where we can be our true and full selves in at all times. And so those are a couple of the major pieces that are involved in my work and what I teach others.
I love that. Such beautiful work. So many things I want to hit on there, but first and foremost, because I know we all just love hearing a backstory and, we learn so much off of each other's journeys as well. What brought you into this line of work? How did you get here?
Yeah. So, my journey into this work was through relationship. perfectly. So for me, that started before the age of 2 when my dad left. And at the time, of course, he wasn't leaving, my mom. He wasn't leaving me. He was leaving my mother. My my inner child and what I made up subconsciously, of course, because I was less than 2 years old, was that he was leaving me. And so I went off into the world and tried to do everything that I could to prevent him from leaving me and anyone else from leaving me again, subconsciously as a child. And so, that was always in my environment and in my makeup. And then unfortunately, when I was 17, in part, this was a co-creation with my mom, and she had her own patterns that came up with this. But in part, when I was 17, my mother passed away from cancer. And so here I was, terrified of being abandoned my entire childhood. And then again, my mother had her own paradigms where, probably was running some version of the programming. I don't want to be here because life was really hard. I have a twin sister, so she was raising the two of us. She wanted to be there, but she was hard, right? And so, those two things really, they rooted in a deep abandonment pattern. So when I went out to try to date and to try to find love in my life, it didn't work because people kept leaving. I kept attracting emotionally and physically unavailable partners. And basically, after years of therapy, of really trying, like, understanding my story but not having really anything change, I finally decided to do something different to create a different results in my life. And that was pivotal. It was fundamental. And that was really what set me off. I woke up, I went on this retreat. I woke up in 8 days, and it really just was like, okay, it's time to go. It's go time. And I will say this, and I will say this as a point of consciousness for anyone listening. I have always, albeit sometimes subconsciously, but I've always somewhere within me known I was going to get into the love and relationship space. I always knew as well that I was destined for great love in my life. And I do believe that we all get to have that if we wish. If you have the desire for something, it is because it is there to be fulfilled.
I so believe that as well. I've always had this, same thing, just this desire to help people and really a desire to be in the coaching space in some form of a leadership space. And it's so interesting the way, like, I'm sure similar to you, I've taken on so many roles and roads, like trying to get there and figure it out. But it all at the end of the day kind of has a similar underlying premise. But I just so believe in that, like, what is for you is truly for you in this life.
Yeah. And noticing, bringing consciousness around the desires we have so that we can bring those into the world and not let them lay dormant within us in these lives.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about being yourself, being ourselves, and why is it that, just from like what you see with your line of work and what you've studied and everything like that, why is it that so many of us truly have so much trouble being ourselves when we get around other people or in relationships?
Well, our automatic conditioning when we're kids is to, subconsciously, we're like, we have to be like our parents, right? For love, subconsciously, even deeper, for a lot of times, that there is a fear of abandonment, right? Our parents, 90+% probably of our parents wouldn't have put us ever out on the streets. Obviously there are situations where that's actually true, but there's so many of us that just grew up in, normal, these normal households. And so we're in this conditioning of just watching our parents, what they do, what they don't do, and deciding, okay, I'm going to be like that, or I'm not going to be like that. But, a lot of times underlying is this fear of, okay, I won't be loved. They won't be there for me. I won't eat. It can be very deeply rooted in survival mixed with abandonment, and even just existing, right? It's a way that we feel like we exist, become like them. And for me, I can tell you, in my environment, I became a people pleaser because I was like, if I basically do what they do, and my mother, this was a conditioning in our household, but if, subconsciously, and unintentionally, but it was like, if I do what they do, then I'll be loved and she'll like me. And, it just felt so much more comfortable. So then it becomes really uncomfortable to try to be our full and true selves, right? Because we have all of this around us in our environment we've already practiced this for 18 years of our life, just being this other person. So there's that space. And then there's the world's message of like fitting in, right? And you got to do like everybody else is doing. And when you do differently, which has been a fair amount of my growth and a lot of things I've needed to lean into for the work that I'm doing in the world, it's like, no, just get in the box, get in the box with everybody else. Once why are you doing this? And I can feel that from family pressures. And then I can also feel that from friends, and then, kind of a bigger worldly, not so much from my friends anymore, but, from friends, and then, world bigger in the world. I can feel all of that in experience.
Yeah, totally. Do you think that's what keeps a lot of us stuck, kind of both of those scenarios, in terms of just being so, and I'll use the word like terrified to disappoint our parents, or not, like, I joke that I'm a recovering people pleaser, and it's not a joke at all. It's a very true thing that so many of us deal with. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it keeps us stuck. And the thing is like, there's a quote, I forgot there's a book, I think it's called Good to Great or something like that. And this quote, and I'm not going to quote him exactly. And again, I'm sorry, I don't have the name of the author on the top of my head, but it's like, it's funny because right before I got on this call, that quote popped into my head. Good is what stops us from being great. And we have to be willing to, so I'm paraphrasing here. I believe though, we have to be willing to be great. We have to be willing to, again, push out of those boxes, because that's the good zone is I'm super successful and I do what society tells me. And, I follow the rules, right? Great is you're still going to have success and you're going to have a much higher level of success, but it's also like, I don't maybe do what society tells me because I do what's true for me, right? I do what feels right. And I follow my truth and my awareness and my intuition above all else, even if it's hard, even if I get slack from someone and that loves me in my life, all of that, even if I get that, I do what's true for me. It's like the decision, and the older we get as souls, this is just practice, right? So the older we get as souls, so much of the time, it becomes easier to push out of that box. It becomes easier to go, you know what? Because at the end of our time here, so many of us can be worried about our image or something, but at the end of our time here, no one's going to be remembering any of that. But if you make a next level impact, they will remember that, right? That will stay. But those small things you're like worried about, like if you post something or whatever, no one is going to think about that, oh, that person got, didn't get enough, whatever, likes or whatever. No one's going to think of that, but they're going to think if you made a serious impact or you really followed your truth, that stays with people.
Yeah. So true. All those vanity metrics that we're so obsessed with right now. So for anyone who's looking to really start merging outside the box, or even just dip their toe in practicing pleasing themselves instead of pleasing others, where do you recommend that we kind of start in this journey?
Yeah. So a huge thing that's missing right now, even from the teachings that are out there, unfortunately, because most people they're kind of scared of this, to be honest. Like there's like a subconscious fear, but one of the biggest things that's missing is self-connection. Because to be able to express what it is that you want, you have to know what you want, and you have to feel safe with yourself to express that. Because the thing is part of what happens is the safer we feel with ourselves. I know, for instance, like I'm not going to have a conversation if I recognize that that person's really not going to be able to receive my truth. It's almost like it's abusive, might not be exactly the right word, but it's almost abusive to try to have that conversation. It's abusive to me, right? Because it's like, it's not honoring of me. And the safer I feel with myself, I know I have my own back. So then therefore, I'm in a conversation with someone that I do trust and that does feel right. I know no matter what happens in that conversation or in that experience, I've got me. And so where I was going with this in terms of a good starting practice is just starting to ask yourself on a regular basis, what do I want right now? What do I need right now? What am I feeling right now? And if you did that throughout the day, you start to kind of do it's a check-in with yourself, right? And that check-in all of a sudden starts to create, again, it's a feeling of safety, because how many times are we pushing through our day? We're just rushing around. We're not paying attention to anything that's going on the inside of us. We're just out in the world understandably, and it's not about beating up on yourself. If I'm describing,
Right.
anyone who's listening, it's not about that, right? It's just about bringing more awareness. And the one piece of that awareness is that self-connection piece. And another piece I will recommend is, a check-in at the end of the day, where if you had a bad day or if you had any kind of day, right? Just asking from within, or asking yourself, hey, what was that like for you? I talk about this from the terms of inner child work, but whether you're familiar with that type of work or not, just to check in with yourself and go, hey, what did that feel like when your coworker said that to you? Or what did it feel like when that happened with your manager? And just to start to ask yourself, and how, again, it's a practice of having your own back. So it's just an inner dialogue. And it's like, oh, I didn't like that. Or, it could be very simple. It doesn't have to be this huge complex thing, but just that check-in is going to start to help you to feel safer with yourself.
Yeah. I love that. Checking in is so necessary. And it starts slow too. I know for me personally, it took, even just having the awareness of like, okay, I could check in right now, but I'm not going to. And then eventually started checking in. And then it really it's like opening Pandora's box once you do so.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just so much of the time we can make mountains out of molehills. And we can end up in this dynamic where we it becomes so, like, it feels like it's such a much bigger job than it really is. And it's this consistent practice. It's starting, and then it's the consistent practice over time that really begins to change that, right? That really begins to go, okay, this is, something shifting from within.
Yeah.
And we can feel safer with ourselves, and then we just feel calmer and more at peace, so that no matter what is going on in the world, and there's been a lot of chaos going on in the world in the last year, and so no matter what's going on in the world, we can feel safe from within.
Yeah. In your own experience, if you don't mind sharing, how has really checking in with yourself and finding that piece of self-connection really just expanded maybe a certain time in your life, or even expanded your growth in this work with your own journey and everything like that?
What comes up to address this question from is how it's expanded my relationships. And so how it's expanded my relationships is that everyone has my back. And that, it just makes me even teary to even think about that. But like, imagine being, I've used this example before in some interviews and stuff, but in my classes, but the one example of that is like, being on an airplane and, someone kind of bullying me, and someone I don't know, sitting across the way, hearing this, me not even saying anything. They heard it and they were like, you can't talk to her like that. Right. So there's the strangers that do that, or they, I had this happen a lot when I lived in the high rise in Chicago, where people would help me take my groceries to my door off the elevator, which typically they used to like just put them outside the, the elevator, and it's like, see ya. Yeah. Right. So they're not leaving me, right? Because I'm not leaving me. Now, in my personal relationships, it's one of those things where, like, I feel so comfortable asking exactly for what I need, and not feeling that attachment to like how they respond. Or I feel so comfortable being true to myself, right? Which is an ever evolving journey. I'm not going to say, it's like I have moments of feeling really comfortable, and then there's moments where it still feels like it's stretching me. But I feel so comfortable with that miracles happen as a result of that. In being in that space, being in that place of like, I detach from what their truth is, or trying to make them do what I want them to do. I just share my truth, and then I trust what that is going to look like from their end. And so those are just a few of kind of how it's expanded my relationships.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you for sharing. You've mentioned trust a couple times, and I know just in some recent dialogues and conversations and things like that, the question has kind of been coming up about like, okay, well, how do I trust myself? And I feel like I can't trust myself. Like, how do I start trusting myself? Do you have any advice or suggestions on that front?
Yeah, I mean, it'll reiterate what I've been talking about. How we trust ourselves is we go into this practice of how do I have my own back at all times? So let's look at some of the ways that maybe we don't have our back, right? When we agree to something we don't want to do, right? When we don't set a healthy boundary around the way someone treats us, or we stay in a relationship that doesn't feel good. Now, that doesn't have to be a love relationship, it can be any kind of relationship, right? When we let someone treat us disrespectfully, all of those are ways we don't have our own back. And in part, what ends up happening as a result of that is that it breaks trust, right? And then we wonder why we attract partners or find ourselves in relationships with partners that we can't trust. Mm-hmm. And first and foremost, it's building that self-trust from within. And part of how we do that is we honor our feelings. So like that practice that I gave, right? It's like, if I'm checking in with myself, I know, like, hey, like my inner child will feel that, and that's the little girl or little boy that lives in each one of us that had dreams and desires and also was hurt in certain situations, even if they appeared to be small. They might have felt big on the inside. And so my inner child can say, she cares about me. She cares about what I have to say about this experience, right? And she's not going to let someone just roll over me. She's not going to let someone just do whatever they want, just because either she wants to be liked or society has told them that that's okay to treat people like that or do this in society. So yeah, so there's that space of how can I trust myself no matter what? And part of how we do that is just what I just shared, which is so, it seems small, and yet it's a practice over time that makes it so freaking big. So, there's other ways we can trust ourselves, but that's a really big one.
Yeah, kind of the root of it.
Yeah, it's the root of it.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier you had felt abandoned and had kind of struggled with abandonment and things like that. In myself, with kind of doing my own work and understanding some wounding and things like that, I also deal with an abandonment wound. Do you find that is one of the main kind of wounds and blockages with a lot of us as we're kind of like moving through this work, or are there other areas that we might have been wounded as well?
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like that could be a main wound. And then you've got all of these like legs, right? So let's just talk about some of the other legs that are really big, that are really common especially when you have an abandonment wound, though they're common a lot of times with women in general. So one of the legs, well, we've been talking about, people pleasing, putting others first, ourselves second. So that's one of the legs. Now, another one of the legs, though, is basically having all of your relationships revolve around the other person, where I always use this analogy in my interviews where, if you've ever watched a musical, right, there's that person center stage and all the people dancing around that person. And when we can make ourselves and put ourselves as that center stage person, instead of being the person who's dancing around the person center stage, right? Which we do because subconsciously we're trying to make sure we don't get left. So we think if we prioritize and put our attention and our focus and our energy on that person, and it's also the way women are wired, but but if we do that, then subconsciously we think that we won't be left, right? So we just go, okay, if I keep all my attention on this person, and if I ask them what they need, and I put them first, and I put myself second, they won't leave me. So that's another part of the wounding. And I'm just bringing up some big ones that are all part of the abandonment wounding. Another thing that's super common, a lot of times, is leading in our relationships. So because we don't trust, and because we have a fear of abandonment, we go, I'm going to take the lead so you don't abandon me. And so we kind of do all the work for our partners, or a lot of people that I work with are in their, and I used to be this way, they're in their masculine. It's not a negative thing, right? But I say masculine, and masculine energy in when it typically with a woman, a lot of times is doing, it's making things happen. It's super high levels of success and work. Unfortunately, when that goes to translate in relationship, it doesn't translate so well. So what happens as a result of that is we go, okay, I'm going to take the lead, and I don't trust you to do this for me. I don't trust myself to sit in the open space and just wait for you to take the lead here. I'm going to do it for you. And at some point, that polarizes the relationship negatively in an unhealthy way. And so when we lose attraction to our partner, that's one example of it, because a woman in their masculine in relationship, which there's a time and place for both. So I'm not saying you should be all feminine, but a woman and masculine in a relationship, a lot of times is not hot. So I always say it like that, is not hot, right? So knowing, okay, there's a time for me to take charge or maybe take the lead. And there's a time not to, instead of being like, well, I'm just taking the lead because I don't trust you to take the lead.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, almost like codependent behavior in a way.
Well, codependency is another version of what shows up in an abandonment wound, right? Because we're like, if I intertwine and enmesh with this person, right, then again, they won't abandon me, right? So if I, sort of like rely on them, rely is not the right word exactly, but if I rely on them and become like them and, just again, intertwine, then they won't leave.
Yeah.
So that's another part of it. And then, we've been talking about being true to yourself. Well, that's a huge part of what happens when we're in an abandonment scenario, right? Because what happens is that we make up that if we do what they want us to do, if we're like them, part of what happened in my environment is I completely disconnected from my emotions and from what I knew that I wanted, because if I knew what I wanted, then I might communicate that and it might be different from someone else. And then I was subconsciously scared they might leave me. So I just completely disconnected from all pieces of that. And so being true to myself, pushing into those edges of like, how do you have conversations to express what it is that you want, to express what it is that you need and desire, to express what it is that you're feeling. And then that fear that comes because, again, of our conditioning and our childhood conditioning, it's like, if I do this, they're going to leave, right? If I do this, they're not going to be able to hold the space for me. And part of how we shift that is we hold the space for ourselves first, but with some of the practices I've shared. And then all of a sudden, we start to attract a higher level of person that's also able to be with that as well.
Yes. It's so, I love these conversations and really just opening these doors, because I feel like it also makes it very human too, and kind of takes away from like, I'm the only one who's struggling with this, everyone else might be fine, and really just opens the door that like, it's okay. And we all, even child trauma can have so many different faces and everything like that. And yeah, we're all moving and going through something, and like healing is possible, but it's also okay to acknowledge too that like you're only human at that same time.
Yeah. And I remember that was like my first experience being in a room full of people that were all had their own challenges and struggles. And some of them were well-known people in the world. And I was just sitting there and I'm like, oh, and I just thought it was beautiful, like seeing all these people. Obviously they were struggling, but I could see their hearts and I could see their humanity. And that for me was something that was so beautiful. And this willingness to start to recognize what is going on in the inside of me, and then to be able to practice and share that in relationship, that is one small piece of what creates, new paradigm love, right? Because so many of us were in relationships with people and we don't know how to we don't even recognize what's going on with us, let alone how do I communicate that to a partner so that they can hear me and see me and feel me, and they want to be there for me and they want to show up for me in a much higher way than I maybe have previously experienced.
Yeah. So as it pertains to relationships, some of us, will go through that. It can be very hard, more difficult to find an aligned partnership until we really work through a lot of these wounds. Other times we might get into that aligned partnership, but then it's really us working through those wounds together in partnership. Do you have any advice, I guess, for those out of partnership who are really looking to like start doing this work and really get into a state where you're like your energy is completely shifted and you're ready to fully attract that aligned partner?
Yeah. So what I always recommend is to do the healing work on yourself first, right? So in part, that looks like starting to recognize your patterns, which I remember when I was first starting this work, one of the tools I used was to just start to notice like every interaction and looking around and going, okay, that happened in my life. I wonder what that's here to show me, right? I wonder what that's here to teach me. And just I would ask those two questions, as well as like, how is this here to help me to learn and grow, right? And just to start to look at those, and then just to become aware of, wait, that's helping me to feel seen, or that's helping me to acknowledge my needs, and just to start to really start to recognize that. And then if something bothered me, if something triggered me, right, could I be in that space of allowing myself to feel it? Because here's the thing, we want to be in relationships where people don't leave us, right? We want to be in relationships where people really acknowledge our needs, acknowledge our feelings, acknowledge our wants. But if we're not doing that ourselves, we cannot expect to attract somebody who is going to do that for us. So, and if they do, it will not be sustainable in the long run unless that's a relationship you build from the inside out. So, an amazing starting point. I mean, I like, this isn't a little bit of over exaggeration, but sort of not really, close to the last 10 years out of relationship and my work. And I always knew I knew I was meant to create what I'm calling a 10 in love, which my awareness is it's the highest level 10 you can create right now on the planet in relationship. Right. But it was like, I would go to my coach and one of my coaches and I would say, when is he coming? This was earlier on, but I would go, when is he coming? When is he coming? And she's just like, Deb, your work. She taps into this whole stuff. And she's like, your work, you have to create a 10 in relationship. That's your work. Right. And so, and I'd be like, so annoyed. I'd be like, she's like, just keep doing the work. And it's like, and the work is, to be clear, what I'm talking about is healing ourselves, right? It is every place where we have been abandoned and or someone's abandoned us in relationship, loving those parts, making peace with those parts, feeling those parts, honoring your emotions around those parts. So, my initial practice where I started was really that I was, angry. I was really angry at my dad. So, and underneath that anger was pain and hurt, right? But I had to start with the anger. And so I started with the anger, and that was borderline like raging. It was borderline just like it wasn't really my rage, but I was raging, right? I was so angry. And then, from there, once I felt that, then the emotions could start to open where I could start to feel what really was there, which was the pain and hurt and sadness and devastation of my dad, leaving when I was a little girl. And so that willingness, that again was the start of really me building a true relationship with myself, where it's like, hey, I'm not leaving you here. I'm not going to pretend it's okay when it's not. So noticing, when we say this stuff, right? Oh, it's okay. If it's not okay, don't make it okay. Don't make it, that's another pattern, right? But don't make it okay or make someone else comfortable at the expense of yourself. So like really noticing, where, for anyone, noticing where you contract in a relationship. Where do you shut yourself down? Where do you not communicate what it is that you need and you want, when you want, in your truth? And why are you doing that? What are you scared is going to happen as a result of that? So yeah, so just that starting point though, of really looking at your relationship with yourself, looking at the places of where you maybe hold some anger, resentment, hurt, pain from another person. And it's a huge part of the work I do with my clients, but like any parts of those that can truly be resolved, and not from the space of just saying, I forgive you, or from the space of just, being like, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal. You have to own it on a full level, not at a level 2 or 3, which is okay. It's a good starting point, but like really being willing to own it and work through it. And the more we're able to work through it, the closer that aligned relationship in person really comes. And all of a sudden someone's standing in front of you and you can't even believe how they're showing up, let alone, to like have created that interaction.
Definitely. It's so interesting too, just how we're so adept to like, okay, I'm feeling it, but it's like, but are you actually feeling, it's such an, typical nature of like, okay, I'm just going to say I'm feeling it so I can like get to the next level kind of thing. Like, I feel like we're so quick to just try to bypass and like get to the finish line compared to really working through all of it. And it truly just, it plays out in everything in life.
Yeah. Well, in that space of like, when you're sitting across from your partner and they're rushing through something, that's why it's so important we slow down and actually really allow ourselves to really feel it versus just do the override effect, because then you're like frustrated that they're not hearing you or they're not listening to you or they want to get back to the ball game or whatever, variations are on that. And you're like, well, why aren't they? And it's like, well, where are you? Where's the gap there? Right? Where's the gap there for within yourself? So
yeah,
there's benefits to this stuff. It's like, just do it for that.
for sure. Well, and even, in just our society that is so cell phone driven and distraction driven, like you just see it all the time. And to me, it just really shows the power of this work and like the dire need for it right now is to really honor the connection between two individuals having a conversation and holding eye contact and, you know, putting away the TV or the cell phone or whatever it is and like really sit with a person, but at the same time also like sit with yourself, like catch yourself when you go to scroll social media and what are you trying to distract yourself from?
Right. And being willing to put your phone, really even put it across the room for a little bit. Right. So it's like when we can put our, put it out of the way. So it's not like sort of like, oh, I'm going to grab it now, and just, it's like, sometimes I'll have to say, like, I'll realize I'm having that experience of like feeling sad or uncomfortable, or even just like, cause I'm in a lot of environments right now and a lot of other people's environments. And so yesterday when I was driving here, one part of that drive was like, what's going on for you right now, Deb? Like what's your experience right now? And, and I'm at the space where I can feel it right away. Like if it's like something's there, I'm like, I've tuned myself in enough that it's comfortable. And actually I'm all water signs, like it's all my signs. So it's like emotions for me are very comfortable. It's something I love. And I really believe they create much more juiciness and aliveness in our world. But just having that presence of mind especially when there is a lot of chaos in our environments, to at some point, even if it's just 5 minutes, to sit down with yourself and go, hey, what's going on for you? Or what was that like when, that experience happened or whatever it is, right? Tell me what's going on for you. It's even like yesterday. So my dentist did me a really nice favor, and this is like abundance work, but he, like my insurance wasn't in effect yet. And so he offered to do, I don't normally have cavities, but I had a cavity. And so he offered to fill that for free, which is like a really nice thing. I've met him like for once in a year, like it's a new dentist. But what happened was then he put something in, and the way he put it in, it was jagged. And then he wasn't asking me, this was a connection piece, right? He wasn't asking me the right questions to say, is this in okay? And I'm like feeling it, but I don't know what I'm supposed to be feeling versus what it really is, because I don't really have cavities. So I had to go back to him twice to have him to fix it, like twice within like an hour, right? Because I was leaving the area. So I was like, I have to get this fixed. It's got to be fixed, right? Like I can't just, So I bring that up because it was several things, right? It was me being willing in that moment, even though he was doing something for me for free, to take up space, right? And I had to have enough connection in that moment to go, this doesn't feel right. Something about this doesn't feel right. Then there was, once that was all done, and then being on the road, then I had the time to sit with, ooh, that was really uncomfortable. And like all the pieces of like, I had to ask for something. And it's like, if I was paying him, I think it would have been a lot easier, but it was like, I wasn't. So then there was that dynamic for me, like, ooh, I had to do that, it's like, and so just to have that space to be able to be present with myself. So it was like the process of being present in the moment to go, this isn't right. Then having to have the relationship within the office of like going back in there again, like, so I was in there 3 times for this one thing within 24 hours. And then also okay, most importantly, what did that feel like for me? And what was my inner experience? And how do I relate to myself around that once I have the space and time for it?
And on the opposite side of that, had you not done anything about it and we're like, oh, it's fine, he did it for free, then later on, you would, I don't like to use the word suffer, but you'd be in extreme discomfort. You may have to go somewhere else and actually pay a lot, more money than it would have cost in the beginning to even get it filled. And then you just go down this
right. You go down.
hole.
Right. So how do I stay with myself in that discomfort? Right. Because it was very, I'm going to tell you, like, I did not want to go back in that office. Like they didn't know I was coming. I did not want to just like walk back in there and go, this isn't right.
Oh, same page. I totally can drop in and feel that discomfort.
I was like, oh my God, I have to take up space here. I have to take up more space here. Like, I don't want to do that. Like, I just wanted it to be okay.
Yeah.
Right. And I just wanted it to be fine. And then I'm like, I can't go out. What am I going to do if I'm out on the road and this isn't right? It's like, this is going to be even worse and it's not ideal. I'm like, you just suck it up, Deb. You're going to have to suck it up. Like, and then I'm like, I have to feel the space of, that was so uncomfortable to take up space in that moment. Why was it so uncomfortable for you? What decisions and conclusions have I made that I believe I'm not allowed to take up space when someone has done something out of the generosity of their own heart, but like that someone has done something generous for me, And so, I mean, there's a lot of questions and I still probably have more to process with it, just even talking to you about it. but I'm like, it's one of those things. Imagine every single interaction we have in this world like that. Right. Especially the ones that make us so uncomfortable, right? Especially the ones where we're like, I'll give you another example. Like, I was with my friend in the car, and I noticed like he was just in his own space, right? And I'm sitting there, and me being the woman, like just like I'm very aware, right? And so having the presence of mind in that moment to say to him, what's going on for you right now, right? Like, you seem like you're in your head. What's going on for you? And then what happened as a result of that, because I had the presence of mind, and I think I said it from my own vantage point. I don't know if I said for him, I just said like, I'm noticing blah, blah, blah. But, what happened as a result of that was more openness, more vulnerability, because I gave him that space to be able to share, like, this is what's going on for me right now in this moment, as opposed to the old me would have just sat there contracted, kind of wondering what was going on, in that experience or whatever. And just would have sat there like, oh, this is okay. I wish I could talk to him about this and know what's going on, but I am not. And then we get out of the car, and then I could, if I was, depending on what it was, I could spend time obsessing about it or just circling in it, over and over and over. And again, that's like another piece of presence is another huge piece of again, what I'm calling new paradigm love, which I know is something that's totally new and it's not out there yet. And it makes sense it's not out there because it's what I'm here to bring to the world, like a huge part of it. But like,
I love that phrase, by the way. I don't think I said that earlier, but new paradigm love. Truly, it's wonderful.
Yeah. And it is one of those things, like, I'll give just like a couple examples of like old versus new paradigm. So like old paradigm is that we, think we can only present one part of ourselves in relationship. New paradigm love is that we can present our full and true self, in relationship, right? So noticing those spaces, right? Old paradigm love, we don't, share our experience. And again, we just sort of shut down, or we pretend things are okay when they're not. New paradigm love, we're so present that we're sharing our experience, even if it feels uncomfortable, or somebody's maybe you perceive somebody may not be ready for it. And of course, there's agreements and stuff that you can set in place that will make it easier to share this stuff. But it's that constant, like a lot of the components of new paradigm love. It's, vulnerability, it's authenticity, it's presence, it's knowing how to work with energy to create more aliveness and juiciness in a relationship. There's a lot of like practices that I have through intuitively, just these components of that are so like crucial and so important to bring more realness and more aliveness and more fullness into every single relationship and everything. So just like it's a small little taste, but there's so much to this, there's polarity there, right? And that space of like, how do I create polarity? How do I stay in my body, right? Because so many of us, when we are in relationship, we're not in our bodies in our relationship, right? It can be really intense, especially depending on, if you've had trauma or something, right? Some kind of trauma. But in general, so many of us, where like, think about even intimacy with a partner, right? You leave yourself to have that intimacy, right? You're not really connected. You're not really there. You're not really present. So, there's embodiment practice that's part of that as well. I mean, there's just a lot of components, but it's it's a huge part of what we're missing in the world, because that connection and stuff, just like we're talking about with putting the cell phone down, right? Like, how do you really create deep, juicy connection with another human being and have it continually keep expanding, and not just have it be one day and then you're like back to normal life, right? And then and back to your daily routines, and that just, you just lose that. So
yes. And across the board of like all relationships too, like as you're talking about this new paradigm love, I'm seeing it for friendships and workspaces and family. And I mean, it feels so refreshing just to hear you talking about the old and the new, because I know we can all connect to both sides of it. And like we get, oh yeah, I see where the old has been, but the new, it's like, oh yes, like we all want, because we all at the root of it, like we all just want to be able to be ourselves and be comfortable being ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And being comfortable. Can you imagine like if there was that space? And the thing is like, a lot of us have this idea that, you have to be in a relationship a long time for this to create. But I can tell you, as somebody who's created this and different dynamics in relationships, you do not, right? What has to be there is a bit of being on the same page, and most importantly, that safety, right? Like, it's like that safety. Okay, you can share anything with me, and I will be, open and loving in a safe space for you, which again starts with our relationship with ourselves. But yeah, like it's going to add so many more layers. Intuition's another piece of that. It's like, it adds so many more layers than what is currently there and what is currently being accessed, which is why so much of the time our relationships can fall flat, after certain periods of time, or they get boring, or they just don't have that aliveness and excitement to them at times, even though it started that way. But even it starting that way, a lot of times, so many of us can be conditioned to think of that excitement from the physical aspect, which is phenomenal. That's great. But the physical aspect doesn't create that excitement. It's the intimacy and all the other components that create that excitement and create that physical aspect at levels that have yet to be really touched upon or really accessed or reached at this point in the work. And again, that's a huge part of what I came here to do. So yeah, but it's really exciting stuff, because of all any of us needs is relationships right now. Connection, relationships, like that's, all the stuff that was brought up last year, so much of that would be resolved, healed, at least in good part, through relationships, first and foremost with ourselves, and then with the world.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Connection is so crucial. so crucial.
We're missing that. We don't know how to do it. We don't know, how do I stay in relationship with someone?
Yeah.
Like, how do I relate? Really, years ago when I was working with a therapist, this is like almost 10 years ago, she's like, Deb, you're not being relational. And she would say that. And I'm like, I don't even know what she means. Like, what does that mean, being relational? And in essence, it means like, you're not relating, like what's going on the inside of you. And then how do you share that in real time with your partner? Right. And so again, that requires self-connection. It's like, the connection enough to go, what am I feeling right now? And then the connection to go, this moment feels off. And then, okay, this in a way that this person can receive it, and they want to show up for me in the ways that I want, which is where the polarity and the feminine masculine aspect comes into play.
Yes. So important. You've mentioned just one thing real quick, your therapist, a couple coaches you've worked with and things like that. As we're talking about relationships and the relationship with yourself, I've also found that having someone else to do the work with is so important. Like there's a lot we can accomplish by ourselves. However, we can really only get so far. We can only read so many books. Do you feel that in this line of work, it really is important to, while yes, we are connecting within and working with all these tools and practices, to also at that same time, when you need it, have a therapist or a coach or someone on the other side to kind of help guide you in the process?
Okay, so let's bring up this. I love that you asked this question because I want to add something a little bit unique to this conversation. What's really important to understand is one of the fundamental wirings that people that especially have an abandonment wound experience is that they can do it all themselves. So it's so important. It's a 20 catch 22. I'm like, what's the word? I was gonna say crux. I'm like, that's not the right word. It's a catch 22, right? Because we fundamentally have this, this wiring that wants to basically, we made a decision that we could do it all ourselves because we were trying to avoid further abandonment. So we're like, I can do it. I've got it. I don't need anyone else. And then that way, if I don't need anyone else, no one else can hurt me and I won't be abandoned. And of course, that's all subconscious. And so it's a catch 22 because part of what will heal that is reaching out for help and reaching out for support. And yet so many of us were like, I'll pick up a book, right? Well, we're like, we'll do all the things that, are just where we don't need anyone else to do that. And so really part of what starts to change that is saying, I'm willing to seek out deeper support than maybe I've had in the past so that I can actually start to rewire this so that it can change and where I can actually tell the universe, I do need other people in my life. And guess what? That's part of creating an amazing partnership with another human being, right? Is to be able to say, I need your help right now, or I can't do this all myself. And it's a polarity thing too, with if you're in a feminine body and you're desiring to be more feminine, right? Because that polarity piece is attractive when you're like, I can't do it all myself. Because part of what can detract another person, and it's not really about that, it's about being true to yourself. But part of what can push them away is if you're like, I've got this. I don't need your help. I've got this all the time. And you're operating from more of a masculine mindset in that aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is so important to be willing to open to that support, whatever speaks to you, but to be willing to open to that support and say, you know what, I don't have this. I need help. And it's the consistency over time, which again, I've taught classes in the past and it's like, oh yeah, no, I can do that. I can love myself, or whatever the thing is, but that consistency, sure, you can love yourself tomorrow after this call, right? But it's like, what does that consistency look like day in and day out? How do you feel your feelings day in and day out? And then also having someone hold that space for you to move to that next level of yourself. So it is so crucial and so important.
Yeah. And just the consistency. I mean, because again, it's like, we'll have this conversation and, I fall privy to it all the time. And it's like, okay, we're going to do it. And then a couple days go by and then you fall off. So yeah, I just feel that so much.
I would say to that too, you want someone else to stay with you through all the hard times. How do you stay with yourself through the hard times, right? A huge part of what creates that is having someone else help you to stay with yourself through the hard times so that now you're in practice so that you can call someone in that actually will mirror and reflect that for you.
I love that. Where can people connect with you to follow you, potentially work with you, and just really follow along with all the exciting things that you're doing?
Yeah. So, you can head on over to my website at debacker.com. There I've got my newest, I'm calling it an immersion. It's a 2-hour complimentary immersion or a master's class. But it is 10 out of 10 love. And it's all about how we create feel right, all in juicy new paradigm love in our life. And part of what I'm going to be doing is teaching relational skills and helping you to see some of the subconscious pieces you might not be able to see that block relationship. And then also some things that could help you to build a much stronger, juicier relationship. So there's that on there. Obviously I've got on my homepage of my website, I've got my Facebook page and my Instagram and everything. And I also have a 30-minute complimentary assessment. So depending on if you're a master's class person or an assessment person, but this is a 30-minute call with me where we'll look at, what are some of your areas of opportunity for relationship and then how I can support you with that. So yeah, so I would love for anyone that feels called, I'd love to connect further. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. I've read through some of your blogs, and just you have a lot of really great content that you put out there. So I love
Thank
it.
you. Thank you. Yes. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Well, before we close out, I like to end all my episodes with some loving your own soul questions, which are just some random on the spot questions so everyone can get to know you a little bit deeper or a little bit differently than they do already.
Awesome.
So you mentioned you have a lot of water in your chart. I would love to know if you don't mind sharing your sun, moon, and rising sign.
Yes. So I have all the water signs. My sun is Cancer. My moon is Scorpio and my rising is Pisces.
Cool.
So yes, I got them all.
So fun. I'm a Cancer rising myself. So definitely appreciate that water energy.
Yeah.
Do you know your human design type? Have you looked at human design?
I'm a
at all?
generator.
Okay.
Yes, I'm a generator. Yes.
Cool. I am too. Do you have a favorite morning beverage?
Oh, favorite morning beverage. See, this is a part if I was going to say anything, I'd say water, but I would say a huge conditioning for me is to really be in the practice of like recognizing I'm thirsty and like getting a need met, which is to drink some water. So I don't drink that much in the morning to totally out myself. But yes, if I was going to be, it would be this guy.
Cool. I do that need with using the bathroom. I'm like, oh, let me just get one more thing done. Let me do one more thing, and to the point where I'm literally then sprinting to the bathroom.
I totally relate to that too. So yeah. Yes.
If you were to jump on an airplane and go anywhere in the world right now, where would you go?
Well, I'm exactly where I need to be. I don't want to like give a cliche answer. I'm exactly where I need to be. I freaking love to travel. So I really am exactly where I need to be right now. And I'm like pretty much in the exact right place I need to be. And if I was a little bit more settled, I'd want to go, what's popping in for me right now is the Maldives.
Cool. Have you been before?
No, I've been to every continent, but I have a soft goal to hit every country. And Maldives and Bali, those are two on my radar right now.
Yeah, so fun. Do you prefer to cook at home or go out to eat?
Well, I've been eating a lot, sort of like at home or in these spaces. I really do love the magic of creation and following my intuition in the kitchen when I have the space and time to do that. And it's really fun to go out for a nice meal too. But yeah, my first preference is the cooking. Yeah, at home.
Yeah, I feel that. Are you a sunshine, rain, or snow person?
Oh, give me the sunshine any day of the week. So I have to say, I was driving from Phoenix to like LA area last night, and the sun was like in my eyes, and I was like, "Oh my god, it's so sunny here." It was good, but I was like, I can't see. Yeah.
Isn't it funny how, as much as we love the sunshine, there can be certain instances where the sun can also feel very invasive as well, like that experience.
Yeah. It was beautiful. The thing is, I was taking in the beauty. It's like, this is so beautiful. But I was like,
yeah, you're like, I can't see. For sure. If you could go backwards to a 20-something-year-old self or just a past self, is there anything in particular that's coming to mind that you know now that you wish that you had known then?
It's not that. What I would tell my 20-something-year-old self is it's all going to be okay. That's what comes up for me. Yeah. It's not so much what my 20. Yeah. Besides that, just, it's all going to be okay.
Cool. Love that. One thing you are most curious about right now?
Ooh, relationship. I mean, I'm just like the slight background of this without going into too much detail. It's just, I have spent not just the last decade, but lifetimes creating what is going to happen for me in this lifetime. And I just I'm so excited and on fire about all of that and love and just like how do you create epic love in your life?
Love that. Yeah, goosebumps. Yeah. That's so fun.
Yeah.
I feel that for you. Oh, all right. Final question that everybody gets. When did your exploration to diving deeper into your own soul first begin? And how has it evolved since then?
Well, the short answer of that would be about 10 years ago. So I hesitate to answer that because it's like, it started when I came into this physical form. It started before that.
For sure.
But like 10 years ago. And it did start with a very, very short-term relationship, if you could call it that, ending, me in tears at a family friend's house. And again, finally ready to do something different to create a different result.
Yeah. I love the levels that you answered that and that you could have answered that. It's one of the reasons I love that question. It's so interesting just what intuitively typically comes out. Well, Deb, thank you so much. I mean, for me, this is just such an inspiring and enlightening conversation. And I definitely know that those on the other end are going to love it as well. And just, yeah, kudos to you and all the work that you're doing. And I mean, you're also just such an example of like being brave enough to be true to yourself and also honor the work. And, you're creating something new and it's just so cool.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so grateful. It's really wonderful. I was really excited for this conversation. It's just really wonderful to be able to connect with you.
All right. What a lovely episode. Deb is just truly so wonderful. I just feel I get like overwhelmed emotionally a little bit of just the incredible connections and guests that have come onto this show. I mean, it's just been, it's been everything and more that I could have ever imagined. And I'm forever grateful. And with that, if you do feel inspired and you enjoyed today's conversation, I myself would be so honored to have you rate and review the show. Your ratings and reviews really do mean so much to me and our guests, and in return, really just help me to grow the show, continue bringing on more incredible guests. So please do if you feel inspired. Also, feel free to drop in on Instagram and say hi or let me know what you're enjoying about the show. If you have any recommendations, I would love to hear them. You can find me on Instagram as @theBrittOlson. Or if you also would like to join our private modern wellness community Facebook group, again, just DM me or go follow the link down in the show notes to join us. We have such a special community and conversations happening in there. And thank you all again. Thank you for tuning in, being part of this community. Thank you, Deb, for holding space with us. And I so look forward to continuing the journey with you again soon.